Good evening, Tom Flynn, Senior Manager at White Shield Partners. We're here for the launch of the Global Labor Resilience Index in Davos, 2020 edition. And one of the specific aspects of the 2020 edition, which of course measures the resilience of labor markets across the world, 145 countries and economies, one of the particular aspects of it is that it looks at certain countries at a subnational level. In fact, the methodology was adapted to the subnational level. And there's some insights on the United States in particular as a case study. Could you give us your thoughts on what some of those insights are?
So I think first, when you look at the United States, you know that it's different than some of the other top countries within the GLRI. So as opposed to some of the smaller European countries in terms of the Nordic type of model, the United States is obviously a much bigger labor market, a federal level versus a state type of level. So you have actually multiple labor markets within the United States itself. So in the whole, you've got a dynamic labor market. And by that, I mean it's easier for people to move from one place to the other in terms of finding work because of cultural, language, similarities, et cetera, despite the fact there's been a slight downturn in that. From the actual report, we see one thing that's not very surprising. So you see actually within the coasts, so both the east and the west coast, as having the most labor resilience within the United States. So you can see that as a couple of different ways. So one could be in terms of the educational institutions, so strong schools both on the East Coast and West Coast. Second, in terms of the degree of urbanization. So the idea that you have more skilled workers that come together, they've got different types of skills, they can start different types of companies, they can transfer different types of knowledge from each other. So you have those two types of aspects as well. You have another aspect within the United States that as well is perhaps a bit maybe not as surprising either, and that some of the states which are the least labor resilient would be in the Southwest. The southeast of the United States. So, for example, Louisiana, Arkansas, et cetera. And there we can look at a few different factors. So one could be actually the more rural setting of that. So you don't have those, amalgamation kinds of effects where you have all these different types of people coming together and transferring knowledge. So that could be one thing. Second, you have a more of aging type of population. So you've got an older type of workforce that's maybe less adaptable in terms of adapting different skill sets, et cetera. Three, you've got the infrastructure aspect of it as well. And that is directly actually related to policy. So the idea that, the government can take an active role in developing the infrastructure needed to actually support a strong labor market. And that infrastructure in terms of road transportation, connections with people, digital communication connections, et cetera. Now, within all of this, you also have some interesting success stories, and that actually show that unique capabilities and the idea that policy can actually support good labor market outcomes. We take a look at two of them. So first would be Colorado. And Colorado actually scores very highly on the policy aspect within the Global Labor Resilience Index, while it's okay within the structural aspect of it. So one, you can see that policymakers in Colorado have actually taken this idea of Colorado as an attractive place for young people, in terms of the scenery, in terms of the different types of recreation activities, et cetera. And they've actually looked to attract then different people, who may be, working in tech within California, looking for a different type of lifestyle, et cetera, and actually have made that and supported Denver to actually be, in particularly Denver, to actually be an innovation or types of entrepreneurial hub even within the mountain territories. Second, you actually have Minnesota, which is the same in terms of Colorado, in terms of, very highly scored in terms of the policy aspect, and as well, okay in terms of the structural aspect of it. So you can actually see Minnesota's long use of, investment in education. So the University of Minnesota is a land grant university that actually then tapped into the agricultural portion and has now taken the agricultural industry within Minnesota, which is the fourth largest export of agricultural goods, and actually has upscaled it and upsized it. So you've got companies like Cargill, for example. Then you actually have connections within Minnesota in terms of the biotech industry as well. So you've got Medtronics, for example, as a huge industry within the United States. So the point being is that the United States, while having the one federal market, actually has many different types of labor markets, and that flexibility in the different policy making has actually contributed to be at number 3 overall.
Excellent, thank you, very clear. I have another question for you, which relates more to the international front. And to what extent do you think the resilience model of the United States offers some good practices or some direction for other markets around the world?
So I think first there's the question of, what are the aspects of the United States and in terms of the labor market, which perhaps could be improved on, in terms of the other countries. So one would be in terms of active labor market policy. So the idea about the state actually intervening to support people to actually the training aspect of it. So that's one thing in terms of that's different in terms of the United States versus others. Second would be in terms of the passive labor market policies, in terms of that you have different states within the United States that offer different social insurance benefits as well. So those types of things are also symptoms of a labor market or different policies at a state level, which may not as be applicable in different types of countries. However, you have some great different examples. So one would be the connections in terms of the urban poles or urban kind of areas that are supported by infrastructure spending. So you take a look at the whole Silicon type of idea, where you have government investment, at least at the start of it. Two, it's the connection with educational institutions. So the example of Minnesota, for example, you've got the land-grant university that's connected to the biotech industry, which is then supported in essence by the state. Third, I think that for a long time in the United States, you had a very open kind of immigration policy. So the idea that we want to attract skilled labor into the particular country. And we do that, one, in terms of the large labor market, in terms of the big market size, but also that link with education, where someone comes in, they graduate, and then they stay in companies. So I think you have some of those different types of things in terms of the labor mobility aspect of it. You have in terms of the connection between the educational and then the work aspect as well, that I think have made the United States strong in that regard.
Great. Thank you.